Good morning, everyone here in person and joining us online, and welcome to Chesterland UCC, and welcome to our weekly service. And as we always say in the UCC, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. You are absolutely welcome here. Doesn't matter whom you love, what you believe or don't believe, how you dress, what you look like, you are welcome here as you are. Today's moment of focus is from Lydia Maria Child's book, An Appeal in Favor of That Class of Americans Called Africans, from 1833. We first crush people to the earth and then claim the right of trampling on them forever because they are prostrate. If you are able, please rise for our first song of the morning. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open yourself to the song. Open yourself to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Rejoice and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
So this is the time in our gathering where we extend the invitation to you to take part in the life of the church through the act of giving. If you feel so led as to share your resources with Chesterland UCC, you can do that online through the QR code that is found in the bulletin. You can mail it in, or, and I forgot to put a basket out, but I will do that before the end of the service. We keep a basket back there if you just want to drop it in the basket on your way out. And with that, would you please join me in prayer for our offering blessing? Spirit of life, be upon us. Do not let us waste these precious lives by dulling them with greed and apathy or selfish endeavors. Make us alive with love for one another, with the joys of pursuing truth and the hope of struggling together toward justice. Bless our offerings and bless our endeavors. May it be so. Amen. Today's scripture passage is from Matthew chapter 16, verses 21 to 26, and I am reading from the Inclusive Bible. Jesus began to explain to the disciples that he must go to Jerusalem to suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and religious scholars, and that he must be killed, and on the third day raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Never, Rabbi," he said. "This will never happen to you." Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get yourself behind me, you Satan. You are trying to make me stumble and fall. You're setting your mind not on the things of God, but of mortals." Then Jesus said to the disciples, "If you wish to come after me, you must deny yourselves, take up the instrument of your own death, and begin to follow in my footsteps. If you would save your life, you will lose it. But if you would lose your life for my sake, you will find it. What profit would you show if you gained the whole world but lost yourself?" Now, during last week's message, I said that as clergy, as a spiritual person, as an individual seeking justice within our world, how I read the Bible personally is through a lens of an ongoing evolution or a transformation of society, of myself, of others toward justice, becoming more just in how we live and how we operate in this world. Within Scripture, we are constantly reminded of and encouraged to fight for, to stand for, to embody justice and mercy and compassion and solidarity with those being oppressed. And that God's kingdom is one of the reversal of power dynamics, not the upholding or the justification or the defense of those power dynamics. And within the gospel narratives, Jesus was in such profound solidarity with marginalized and oppressed people that he endured great persecution as a result of it, to the point of being executed by the state at the behest of the religious establishment. And beyond that, Jesus knew that by standing on the side of the oppressed, by standing against empire, by speaking out against the religious oppression of his day, he knew that his life and the lives of his followers were in danger. And in today's text, Jesus drops this heavy news on the disciples. Not only is he saying that he will die, like soon, but this rabbi that so many have placed their hopes in won't just die. He won't just be murdered, but he will also be publicly humiliated. He will suffer, and he will be made an example of by the government and the religious elite, the church basically of that time. And he'll be made an example of what happens to people who try to transform, who try to change the system that privileges the few, that privileges the 1% at the expense of everyone else. But Peter does not respond to this news well at all. His response is so oppositional that Jesus sort of has to smack him down a little bit by calling him a Satan. And what he means here is not a demon, as Satan has come to be misrepresented within contemporary culture, but Satan as the word is translated in the text, which is an adversary. That's it. That's what Satan means. Adversary. Peter was opposing Jesus to the point where Jesus viewed him in that moment as an adversary. Peter was rejecting the difficult truth, the horrible truth that his rabbi was sharing with him in that moment. And as a result, Peter was refusing to confront his own vulnerability as a follower of Jesus. But let's not be too hard on Peter here, because this is a very human response, right? Denial? It's a very human response. I can only speak for myself here, but there have been plenty of times in my life where I have been faced with a difficult truth, a painful truth, and I've tried to either avoid it or just reject it outright entirely. When reality becomes too difficult, too painful, too oppressive, we can often seek out ways to, plug up the cracks, so to speak, so the truth doesn't pour through those cracks. Sometimes we find it necessary to keep reality at bay. And it's important to state here that that's not necessarily a bad thing. None of us should be required to hold all of the pain of the world within ourselves. It is too much. We've talked about this before in other messages. We are simply not designed as human beings to carry the long-term trauma that seems to have become our cultural norm. It's like a slow motion cultural destruction. And sometimes we need to set boundaries around our mental and emotional health, try to regulate the amount of pain that we are engaging with, and construct healthy release valves for the stress and anxiety and trauma we seem to be living with on a daily basis. But that is not what Peter is doing here. He's not protecting his heart. He's not protecting, his anxiety. He is outright negating what Jesus is telling him. He is avoiding the difficulty of this truth, of this situation. Peter is looking to escape the difficult reality that he has been confronted with. And something happened last week in the world of church and clergy news that made me think of this response from Peter. And maybe some of you heard about this. I was posting about it, but maybe you saw it elsewhere too. A Presbyterian pastor by the name of Alexander Lang, he publicly posted an article on why he was quitting the pastorate after 10 years. He cited a number of reasons for his decision, from growing exhausted by there always being congregants who didn't like something he'd preached, and not being shy about telling him in some of the cruelest ways, or just outright trying to get him fired. Or that he was too conservative for some, too liberal for others. I know I don't have that problem, but but both sides attacked him for not being enough of one or he was trying to please everyone, but kept getting assaulted by both sides because he wasn't enough of one or the other. Or one of the most difficult realities of clergy work, and that is we as clergy, and this is not being said for sympathy or to feel sorry for us, but we carry a lot of pain. There's our own life struggles and pain, for sure. But on top of that, we also carry the pain of our congregants who come to us with their life difficulties and their pain. Clergy care for their congregations, at least they should. And so because of that, your pain becomes our pain. It's an important part of the job, to be sure, and one I think that most clergy embrace. We want to be there for you. We want to be there for the community, but the reality is that it does take an emotional toll on us. Lang also discussed a lot of other issues in his article. Some I related to very closely. Some I didn't really relate to too much at all. He had a congregation of 500 plus people, and he was talking about, well, I have to take care of all these people and everything. It's like, dude, you have a congregation of 500 people. Build up some volunteers, But anyways, there were some topics I related to and some others that I didn't. But all of them were topics that I and other clergy have and this is the important part, other clergy have discussed these topics since I have even considered being clergy. We have classes on this topic in seminary. And that's all very important for what I want to talk about today. Because it's not news to pastors that the profession is taking its toll on us, and many are fleeing the pulpit as a result. The pollster group Barna has a name for it. It's called the Great Pastor Resignation of the 21st Century. A survey by Barna of clergy last year revealed that 42% of pastors are considering quitting. And those are just the ones who felt comfortable enough to tell the truth. And the top two reasons cited for this were the immense stress of the job and feelings of loneliness and isolation. Those were the top two by far. Now, after Lang's article came out, it seemed to me, at least in my circle of people and what I could see, that many clergy, mainline to liberal to progressive, they started to circle the wagons around the church and the clergy profession. I read comments on social media such as, he probably really wasn't called to the role in the first place, so he just couldn't handle it. The dude did it for 10 years. Or he just didn't have the right support system around him. Or just disregarding him entirely because, and I'm quoting on this one, this guy is white and straight and privileged. And I'm not going to lie. There were some privileged blind spots in his article, absolutely. But if you think about it, for me, that just makes it worse. Because if clergy work can be that difficult for someone with privilege, imagine how difficult it is for someone without privilege. Imagine being queer clergy and constantly being told you shouldn't be allowed in the pulpit. Imagine being a woman clergy and being constantly told you shouldn't be allowed in the pulpit. And then all of the ancillary pressures that come from that starting point for you. The difficulties that Lang highlighted are not mysteries. They are well known amongst anyone who has been clergy for more than a day, and we are all aware that the church has a history of violence. Physical violence, sure, but emotional violence and spiritual violence, absolutely. And yet, after this piece came out, many people that even I know fell over themselves to condemn Lang and to protect the church and to protect the clergy profession. And I would suggest that this is exactly what Peter was doing with Jesus. Lang's detractors are avoiding the difficulty of the situation. They, like Peter, are looking for an escape from the difficult reality that Lang's article confronted them with. So in response to all this, I posted the following statement on my social media. Clergy friends, we are not called to be bootlickers for the institution of the church. We are here to transform it. Can anyone really say with a straight face that the church is healthy? That clergy are treated well? That our health and well-being matters? Historically and contemporarily, the answer is a big no. Yes, that might be the case in your particular church, as it is mine, which was in my statement, but the overall institution is absolutely toxic and abusive to clergy and congregants. Even in healthy churches, the stresses are substantial, and we respond by attacking those who speak out because they can't take it anymore. Everyone is asking, why are clergy leaving the pastorate in such large numbers? Your guess is as good as mine. Now, I did receive several private messages responding to my post, and one of them said, and I'm going to paraphrase because it was quite long, but one of them said, transforming the church is just not in the cards. I need my job, and I'm not going to bite the hand that feeds. Now, interestingly, just before Jesus rebukes Peter and calls him an adversary, interestingly, Jesus also called Peter the cornerstone of the church. Just right before that. And this dichotomy of Peter is so important in a conversation like this because it forces us to ask an important question. And that is, which Peter are we? As the church, I mean. Which Peter are we? Are we the cornerstone of the church, or are we an adversary to progress, to change, to transformation? Are we, as the church, fulfilling our role in this world, being the cornerstone of love and compassion and justice? Or, again, is the church an adversary, a Satan to justice and equity and inclusiveness? Is the church, are we a prophetic voice in a culture that glorifies money and power and control? Or do we condemn truth-telling when it gets a little too uncomfortable for our taste, when it gets a little too close to home maybe? Are we more interested in retreating to the safety of not rocking the boat? Or might we be interested in burning the boat and building a new one? If we are more interested in the former versus the latter, then in today's passage, Jesus basically tells us, game over. He says, if you would save your life, you will lose it. What profit would you show if you gained the whole world but lost yourself? In other translations, it says, what do you have to gain if you gain the whole world but you've lost your soul? And so in the church, when people call out oppressive practices, when people speak truth about their collective worth and they refuse to participate in their own trauma any longer, do we call that courageous? Do we call that sacred? Do we call that transformative? Or do we call that extreme? And just ask that they, refrain from disruption. Do we operate as the cornerstone of love and compassion and justice? Or do we circle the wagons? Do we make excuses and in essence serve as a Satan? Because we have to be honest with ourselves. Despite our call, the church's call to serve as the cornerstone of love and compassion and justice in this world, the church and Christianity has historically been used to deepen and strengthen dominant systems of oppression. The church has largely been more concerned with cozying up to power than challenging systems of oppression. Conservative evangelicals don't represent the entire church, I understand that, but conservative evangelicalism sold its soul for one issue: Roe v. Wade. They gave up any authority, any integrity they had to back one of the worst candidates for president, one of the worst presidents in the history of the United States. How do you come back from that? How does the church recover from that? And even though we're not a part of conservative evangelicalism per se, that reputation falls onto us too, guilt by association. It's difficult for me to hear our moment of focus today and not think of not only the historical Christian church, but the contemporary Christian church. We first crush people to the earth and then claim the right of trampling on them forever because they are prostrate. You might even say that the modern institutional church gained the world. It absolutely has gained power, both political and cultural. And just because people are fleeing the church, don't mistake that for the power that the institution still has over the culture. It gained money, it gained influence, but it lost itself along the way. It lost its prophetic soul and became an adversary to love and compassion and justice through the church's history of violence and oppression. And this, I would suggest, is reflected in the mass exodus of people fleeing the church, congregants and clergy both. But in times that are so tumultuous and uncertain, we, the church, we actually have an opportunity right now to rebuild things, to burn that boat down and to rebuild something new, to advocate for and embrace possibilities for real substantive change. Rather than circling the wagons and playing damage control for the church, we should be serving that prophetic role that the church was meant for by calling out the white privilege and racism and misogyny and greed and homophobia and widespread injustices we are witnessing on a daily basis at all levels of society. But in order to do that, we first need to be honest about our own problems, not serving as public relations liaisons for a public that knows all too well the damage that the church has done in the world. It's not like it's a secret. So why are we pretending that it is? But none of this can be done if we, like Peter, choose to deny reality or just simply hide away from it, pretend it doesn't exist, or if we prefer to avoid any disruption for the sake of appearances, or if we operate as a stumbling block instead of as the cornerstone of love and compassion and justice. As a spiritual person, I think that we as the church, as a community, as individuals that comprise that community, I think that we must be that cornerstone, because there is a persistent demand throughout Scripture, exemplified most of all by Jesus himself in today's text, to face reality head on and to speak truth to power no matter the consequences. And one of those institutions we need to be speaking truth to power at is the church. And we do this with love, yes, but also with a prophetic voice, with a strong voice, and yes, with a radical voice. So let's ask ourselves, why are we here? Why is the church here? Is it to say your hellos and goodbyes, sing a few songs, listen to me blather on for a little bit, and then disappear every Sunday? Or is it to be the cornerstone of love and compassion and justice? Whether you consider yourself a part of the capital C church or not, all of us need to work together to dismantle the structures of oppression and death that our society is built upon, and to re-envision and demand and model a system of substantive equity for all, and not discourage people and groups and organizations from speaking truth about the difficult reality of how the system, including the church, disregards their humanity. Otherwise, at least according to Jesus today, it's game over for the church. May it be so.
All my friends were all misunderstood. They say we stand for nothing, and there's no way we ever could. Now we see everything that's going wrong in the world, and we just feel like we don't have the means to rise up and beat it. So we're just waiting for the world to change. We are waiting for the world to change. It's hard to beat the systems when you're standing at the distance, so we keep waiting for the world to change. Now if we had the power to bring our neighbors home from war, they would have never missed Christmas, no ribbons on the door. And when you trust your televisions, what you get is what you got. 'Cause when they own the information, they can bend it like they want. That's why we're waiting for the world to change. We are waiting for the world to change. It's not that we don't care, we're just fighting ain't fair. We are waiting for the world to change. And we're still waiting for the world to change. You keep on waiting for the world to change. One day our generation is gonna rule the nation. We keep waiting, waiting for the world to change. Keep on waiting, waiting for the world to change. We keep on waiting, waiting for the world to change.
If you look in your bulletin, you'll see some reflection questions revolving around today's message. And I don't know if we'll get through all three. What time is it here? Oh, we're doing good. Well, let's start with the first one, and I'll come around with the mic if you have anything you'd like to offer. But how does it make you feel when you hear that 42% of clergy are considering quitting the profession? How does it make you feel? What thoughts does that bring up for you? Anyone have anything? We'll go here, and then you can hand it back.
To me, it's very scary. Another statistic is that 40% of school superintendents have considered suicide recently in the news. And so it's a scary thing, and it does give me some hope to be here and hear what all the people in this church try to do. I think it helps.
Absolutely. Absolutely, for sure.
So I'm going to tell on myself here, because when you first said it, I will say that my first reaction was good. Because
yeah, no, I completely get what you're saying. I'll say a little bit more to that.
Because
yeah, no,
when I
get
was first thinking, I'm thinking of the clergy I would like to see quit.
Yeah.
And so
unfortunately, though, they're not the ones quitting.
Exactly. That's where I went after that. I was like, oh, wait, no, this is bad. This is really bad, because people like you are what make it okay every day. Like, and I know it's hard on your end. We all know that, and it's so appreciated. But that's why this small but mighty group is so important to all of us. Absolutely. Because it does keep us going. Yeah. I mean, it's the only thing that does, really, in such a horrible sea of horribleness every day.
Yeah,
so thank you.
No, and I want to say two things. The second one will address something you just said, but my estimation of Community Church of Chesterland is, I mean, no church is 100% perfect. No church doesn't have some unhealthiness in it. Just like even a good family, right? Is never perfect. But considering now the other churches that I've worked in and have attended, I would say that, and I'm not just saying this because I'm your pastor, but even when I first got here, it felt fairly healthy. It felt like communication was happening. I know this church has had historically some issues with transparency, but I felt that was in existence when I initially read. Everything can be improved, everything can be worked on, but the heart of this church feels healthy, right? But even with that, even with a healthy church, it still takes a toll, particularly because some of the things that I talked about of carrying people's pain, just things that are intrinsic to the clergy job. Not because a church is unhealthy, but because that's just part of the job, and it can wear you down. And one of the things that I hear from people a lot is, well, I mean, don't you have, like, in your conference people you can talk to, and absolutely, there are, yes, absolutely. But a lot of clergy have also been burned by revealing something to someone they thought they could trust, and it coming back around, right? So it can give people pause. Clergy pause as far as how willing they are to share. And the second one, right? 1 second, Donna. The second one is I've always advocated for the church to sort of self-destruct, not out of anger or bitterness or anything like that, because that gives us the opportunity to rebuild with what's left. Sometimes I'll use the analogy, and it's an analogy I don't use much anymore because of the implications of burning churches that we had a few years ago. But, I've always said, strike a match to it and rebuild with what's left, with what is left standing, with what withstood the fire, and rebuild with that. That's always been my advocacy. So I feel you when you say that. Donna?
I was just going to say I served as the association minister for the Western Reserve Association, and it was an enormous honor for me to be the pastor's pastor to 89 pastors. And I tried to always be open. My office was open. My heart was open.
As you are with me.
Oh, thank you,
Yes.
Jess. But that kind of support is incredibly important, and pastors need to have someone to talk to.
Yeah.
One of the other roles I had, which I thought was again an honor, and I would do it again in a heartbeat, is that to help churches find support systems such as pastoral relations committees. We talked about that recently, such as other kinds of supports, so that that pastor doesn't feel alone.
Right.
Because we're not alone in this. It's an enormous honor to be present for people in their intimate moments, in painful moments. Yet it's also an honor for others to be of support to that pastor as that pain is experienced.
Yeah.
So again, I think the greatest honor that I've ever had that was being the pastor's pastor to all those pastors. And again, I would step into it again if I could.
Thank you, Don. And thank you for all that work, and thank you for everything that you've offered me as far as being a sounding board and just your encouragement since I've been here. It means a lot. And I mean, not just Donna as well, so many people that come forward and be like, you know, what can I do for you? How can I be there for you? So it's very heartening, to say the least.
I couldn't help but the question caused me to think about the disrespect that so many of the caring professions are experiencing. Teachers, nurses. Is this a reflection of our society not valuing the right things?
Yeah.
It's as though the purpose of American society is so much materialism.
Yeah.
These are the underpaid professions, but they are the caring professions. And I think our society has to start to re-examine what it values.
Yeah. And don't take what I'm about to say on as judgment on anyone, but one of the reasons I resist professional sports so much, I mean, aside from I've never really been a sports person, but one of the reasons I have a difficult time even trying to engage with it is because of the obscene amounts of money that are, when a new stadium is built, you know, they get, you know, the NFL is a nonprofit organization. Did you guys know that? This multi-billion-dollar industry is a nonprofit organization. So I have just sort of a visceral to professional sports because we have teachers that are literally having to pay for their own, you know, supplies. Teachers that have to now go to school and, you know, are they going to get shot? Is an angry parent going to come in and start screaming at them because they read a story that said, hey, be nice to people or something like that, right? And here these people are making a gajillion dollars to play a kid's game. And so I just, you know, viscerally, but I think that's a reflection of where our priorities are as a culture. We don't pay our teachers well. We, you know, even, you know, I have issues with police, but, you know, Cleveland is, you know, a police shortage. Why? Well, they're not paying them enough, number one. They're not providing them the resources that they need to, you know, to feel safe. You know, I'm, you know, again, I have issues, but police are in a dangerous job. And where, you know, the resources are being cut from under them. Now, that's not true of all police departments. You know, they get their big military tanks and stuff like that. But right now, Cleveland seems to be in that situation. And who suffers because of that? It's not the West Side. It's the communities that are already living in poverty. Because that's, you know, crime emerges out of poverty. And then when you have a shortage of resources to address those issues, those are the regions that are hit the hardest by that lack of care, I guess, by that lack of budgeting.
Just to second what Mary Ellen just said, I'm really a strong believer in the dignity of work, that to do a job well done. I don't care if it's sweeping a floor, but you need to have that dignity. The clergy that is increasing in the Catholic Church are ones that go to seminary wearing a collar, and the nuns that wear a habit now because they have an outward showing of their
Their faces,
status.
Yeah.
So it's the dignity. Teachers don't get any, clergy doesn't get any unless you're, on TV and everything else. So I think that's part of it is just the caring professions don't get anything. They have no dignity. It was, a lot of them, besides clergy, was women's work. So
Right.
of course they were.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the, when I was talking about in my message, the church's role, or at least I believe the church's role, is to speak into issues in order to transform the community, not just transform the church, which is something we need to be working on, but then as a result, transforming the community. And I think that's one of those important issues, because it's drawing people to the question of, where do our priorities lie? That's how the culture changes, by challenging people on where our priorities lie. And when people are made aware, maybe they might be more likely, because sometimes these are blind spots, right? We've just accepted that teachers are low paid. We don't really think about it, right? We idolize the athletes, we idolize the actors making millions and millions of dollars, and the teachers, it's just a system that we've come to blindly accept. But sometimes if you can step back and get people to look at things with new eyes, more objectively, they might be able to see, oh, this is a problem. And this might be a reason why, downstream we are having so many other issues culturally. Because we don't respect the teacher, we don't respect even, the custodian, right? We don't respect people who are doing the work that keeps things running. The custodian in a school, without, your school's going to be, breaking down. Stuff's going to be breaking down. It's going to be dirty. But custodians are traditionally treated, with disdain, right? By kids and teachers. So by changing the way we view people doing those types of jobs that we might consider and have considered to be menial or unimportant, no, there's no such thing. All jobs are important. And that needs to be reflected through how we pay people. The fact that we're having such a difficult conversation around raising the minimum wage still. What? The minimum wage hasn't even kept up with inflation, let alone, the growth of billionaires and millionaires, and, what is it, 8 people control more wealth than 3/4 of the world? That's insanity. That's violence, is what that is. And so the church needs to begin getting people to see these things in a new light and motivating them to address it. I was going to say, anything on Zoom? Yeah.
So Sandra says part of the problem within our church and the collective church is that some people don't want any kind of change because they think the old way is just fine. And Joe follows up with that one. I think that the reluctance to change as adults can still be because people are living in their 3rd grade religion class.
I think both those observations are excellent. Particularly in the church, right? Our theology can be very elementary in a lot of ways. But that first one, tradition and the that's the way we've always done it isms, right? That's been a very difficult thing for the church to break free of. Whether it's changing worship style, whether it's engaging in theological talks that maybe deviate from traditional orthodoxy, right? The church has traditionally been afraid to engage in those kinds of conversations. So yeah, saying 3rd grade religion class is absolutely, because some people are still stuck in that, right? But also I have sympathy for it because I was stuck in that for a long period of time, right? And so I have some sympathy towards that. But what brought me out of it was engaging with people, other people who challenged me to think, who challenged me to look beyond orthodoxy and tradition. And that should be our role too, is to, with love, engage with people and challenge their preconceived notions, whether it's around politics, religion, cultural issues, you name it. Yes, go
I
ahead.
have 3 comments to make.
Absolutely.
Number one, I I look around here and I think Allison and I are the only people that have been part of this church since the early 50s. So we've seen a lot of matches lit. We've seen a lot of reconstruction over the years. Number two, or I think my pet peeve is I get the events that we've had here at the church over the last year or so, and people commenting about all the comments they've had on internet. I want to see these people that are on internet here in the pews.
Yeah.
I want to see, these. I don't care how many. They could be 1,000 comments, but unless they're here in the pews and willing to show themselves and show strength, I don't care.
Agreed.
I don't care.
Thank you. Thank you.
So just kind of jumping, I think, into that second question, and like the concerns and questions, one of the things that both concerns me and that I wonder is with the 42% that are leaving, who, if anybody, is taking those places. We know that people in our generation aren't being seen in the church as much. And the generations that I teach aren't going to church as much. And, who knows if, the people in my brother's generation who are 10, 20 years older than I am are going to church as much. So, like, when those 42% leave, are there people to take those positions? Are there people that are going to come into leadership roles in the church and be willing to take on some of the heavy hitting that the current clergy that are considering leaving are taking on?
The immediate simple answer to that question is no. No. Just using UCC as an example, UCC has churches closing every day. Every day. It's just a fact, it's a stat. And one of the reasons that those churches close is because, and there's other reasons, but one of the reasons is because clergy will quit, and a church may have like several clergy quit over the years. And what that does is that creates a continuing dwindling, return on investment, because people aren't staying in the church, and congregations just get disheartened and they give up. And so attendance drops and those churches are closed. Or you have churches combining because there's not enough clergy to be placed in those churches. That's the UCC. I know it's similar in like the Methodist denomination, just because I went to a Methodist seminary. They have recruiting problems for seminary. They're just not getting enough people into seminary in order to. CTS in Chicago has this issue. MTSO in Columbus has this issue, and I would imagine other denominations have that same issue as well. Mainline liberal to progressive. Conservative denominations tend to, the SBC, the Southern Baptist, has had a considerable exit of folks, but we're seeing a rise in Pentecostalism and some other very conservative forms of Christianity. So some places are experiencing growth. And I enjoy reading articles on possibly why they're experiencing growth to see if that can be somehow translated into what we do. Because if they're doing something right, just because they're a conservative denomination, I don't want to ignore that. But it also sometimes growth comes from unhealthy reasons as well. So, but yeah, the easy answer or the quick, simple answer is no to that question. And then you can start getting into the onion layers of why that might be. But yeah, no, it's a very problematic situation right now.
Well, I was raised Methodist, didn't go to church for 30 years because if you didn't include gay people in your church, you didn't include God. And that's a big problem with the Methodist church right now.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's...
Yeah, they're falling apart. Yeah. Do you guys know what's going on? I don't want to keep us too much longer, but do y'all know what's going on with the Methodist Church? So there's been this decades-long battle within the Methodist Church on ordaining people from the LGBTQ plus community. In their book of discipline, it just specifically says you can't do that. But Methodist churches have been doing it. Methodist conferences have been putting queer people in places of authority within their conferences and whatnot. And it has finally created a, not just a rift, but a rupture within the Methodist Church. And thousands of churches have, I forget the term that they use for it, but basically disengaged from the Methodist Church.
Same thing happened in the Presbyterian Church.
Right.
10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's problematic for a lot of reasons, aside from the monetary reasons and the hit that the Methodist denomination is taking, but just the interpersonal, the communal aspect of it, to this denomination splitting down the middle over an issue that it's the 21st century. It's 2023. This is the issue that they're splitting over. So it's all denominations that are dealing with this.
The tune with silent yearning lends your voice and dare to dream. Dream a church where all who worship find their lives and love belong. Sing a new world into being. Sing as Christ inspires your song. Sing a new world into being, where each gender, class, and race brings its rainbow gifts and colors to God's limitless embrace. Where the lines that once divided form instead the ties that bind. Sing a new world into being, risk transforming heart and mind. Sing a new world into being, where the homeless find a home, where no children ever hunger, but are filled with God's shalom. Where all people work to justice, where all hate and vengeance cease. Sing a new world into being, raise the pure harmonies of peace.
When the way becomes difficult, let us still choose love. When evil comes to break us down and break us apart, let us still choose one another. When power from on high strikes fear in our hearts, let us still choose what is good and what is just. For we know that the love of God will not be overcome, with the assurance that this abiding love is alive in us, today and always. Let us go with peace and courage. May it be so. Amen. Thank you all.